All right, Dougie and Pete are back. Dougie, what a night for Arsenal. I mean, I mentioned before to Chris Boyd, even the most ardent of Arsenal fans, I'm not sure how many of them would have envisaged 3-0 at home to Real Madrid to take into a quarter-final second leg. But in terms of, their progress in domestic competition, we've seen them build up those finishes, 8th, 5th, 2nd in the Premier League. But this was a bolt out of the blue in the Champions League. We were saying before, we couldn't really remember the last time that Arsenal produced this kind of performance against such a big team in Europe. Where do you think last night's performance result ranks in that sense?
I think it's the best in my lifetime. I think by a distance, to be honest. And, no disrespect to the Intercity Fairs Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup that they've won in the past, but Arsenal's European history isn't particularly glamorous for a club of their stature. And they've got past this stage, most recently in 2009, before losing to Man United. Obviously they need to secure their spot in the semi-finals and potentially even go on to a final and see where it leads. But in terms of a one-off result, given the context of Real Madrid having won 6 of the last 11 Champions League, given the fact they were playing against Rodrigo, Bellingham, Vinicius Jr, Mbappe, given the fact they were going into it without Gabriel, probably their best, as Declan Rice said, best player this season, without a recognised centre forward, with Calafiori and Ben White coming back from injury, with Saka only just back from injury, to absolutely obliterate Real Madrid 3-0 with 2 efforts cleared off the line from Alaba and Bellingham, I thought was one of the most impressive performances I can remember in recent memory from an English side in the Champions League.
And maybe, it was always just meant to be. You were going to get not just an unlikely goal scorer, but the way in which Declan Rice scored those goals with those clutch hits for those free kicks. I mean, Pete, astonishing and so unlikely given this isn't really what he does.
No, I mean, who knew he had this in his locker? Absolutely incredible.
Well, he did, but no one else. Yeah.
Good job he backed himself, didn't he? Because he did say about that first free kick, he lined it up and he was going to knock the ball into the box, but he saw the way the wall was set up and where Courtois was, and he said to Bukayo Saka, who was with him, I think I can do this. And Saka just said, go for it, and he did. And, well,
so the free kick coach as well. You see him on the sideline, just hit it.
As well. Right. Yeah. But we can look at Rice's stats here. And in 339 games as a senior professional, well, he'd taken 9 free kicks in the Premier League, of course, never scored one. And he scores 2 last night. It's absolutely incredible. I'm sure Real Madrid weren't planning for that when they were doing their game plans and their dossiers on Arsenal. But, yeah, Declan Rice, he's an esteemed company now as well, isn't he? Because, so 2 free kick goals in the same Champions League game. Only Neymar has done that. Hakim Ziyech has done that against Man United. Cristiano Ronaldo has done that. And the great Rivaldo has done that before.
Yeah, it's interesting to put some context around this because to be brutally honest, in terms of the context of these games, none of them are knockout stage games. Yeah. Yes, that was against Manchester United, but admittedly, I think one of these was against FC Zurich. Or, this one here was a group stage game for Barcelona against AC Milan. So the context of these free kicks is crucial, isn't it?
Well, because as Dougie says, before that goal went in, that first goal went in, Real Madrid had chances. Mbappe had twice gone through, and once missed the target, once shot straight at David Raya. This completely changed the momentum of the game, that first goal. And, of course, a few minutes later, he's got the confidence to stick it in the top corner for another one. And then after that, Mourinho adds the third. And suddenly, Arsenal are out of sight going into the second leg at the Bernabeu, which is just beyond dreams of what the Arsenal supporters might have had.
It still doesn't answer the question, though, guys. What is Declan Rice's best position? What number is he on the pitch? Because, we've seen him play at centre-back before, like a 4, maybe a 6 as the holding midfielder, maybe an 8, pushing forward a box-to-box midfielder. But last night, presumably, this really showcases his ability to score crucial goals.
Yeah, absolutely vital. I think the fact is that he's world-class in 2 positions, as a holding midfielder and as a number 8. But I think, given the fact that Arsenal have been strongly linked with Zubimendi in the last few months as well, maybe there is a suggestion that they see Rice as this long-term left-sided 8. And you can see why. If you look at his goal contributions per season in all competitions, this is since he joined Arsenal. Look at that explosion. 7 goals and 10 assists. It has to be noted that a lot of his early work at West Ham was as a centre-back. Now he's playing as this much more dynamic presence. I think the separation of Declan Rice compared to other 8s in his position is that range of movement. His passing's very good. The fact he can take set pieces, not just free kicks, but corners to such a high standard as well. He's very good in the air, of course. And I actually think the gap between him and the other players in his position are more separate as an 8 than a 6, if that makes sense. But what an amazing player to have in your books and someone that can give so much confidence to Arsenal fans. And how often do you see a £100 million signing just think, yeah, he does, he's warranted it.
Yeah,
He's worked it out perfectly.
Arsenal fans say they got him half price. Last night's evidence.
It's funny because I just remember that day when we announced that news on Sky Sports News. You just go, oh my days, what a price tag. But, this is that absolutely checking out and then some. And talking about versatile players, Pete, we've had Mikel Merino playing up front. Holding midfielder, by definition, essentially does play a little bit differently to that at times. He's scored some great goals, hasn't he, since moving into that position further forward.
And important goals as well. Obviously, stepping up with Havertz and Gabriel Jesus, unavailable to Arsenal at the moment. We can see since he scored those 2 goals on February the 15th against Leicester, when he was first time he'd ever been played as a forward in his career, Arteta just saw something in him, put him up top. And he scored 6 goals in those 10 games since then. Only Marco Asensio at Aston Villa and Bruno Fernandes at Man United have scored more among Premier League players in all competitions since then. So it's an incredible... I think it's great credit to him in the way that he's stepped up, and you hear Arteta talking about the way he's tried to learn the role as quickly as he can. He's asking lots of questions, he's studying it. How can I maximise my skills in that area of the pitch? But also credit to Lewis Skelly for that assist. 18 years old, playing against Real Madrid in the Champions League knockout tie, picks out Merino, and then a wonderful finish.
And what a boost that'll be for him, given the sort of up and down nature of his first, few months in the Premier League, with the sendings off, etc. For him to provide that assist and you say, what a fine finish it was, Mikel Merino going away from goal and snapping it back in. But also, we've got to talk a little bit about the return of Bukayo Saka, Tuki. I mean, it's a great story after 100 days out, returned as a sub, then comes on and starts this game. And really also, Mikel Arteta having to manage the energies of his squad and work out when to rest them, when to play them. So ultimately vindicated his decision to rest players against Everton.
Yeah, he came in for a little bit of criticism for that, didn't it? And I think that was mainly because Liverpool then lost to Fulham the following day, and maybe they see that as a missed opportunity to only pick up 1 point at Goodison Park. And Martinelli and Saka and Odegaard and Partey were left on the bench against Everton. They did introduce some of them for the second half as well. But so impressive to come back at this level from Bukayo Saka, as you say, after over 3 months out with an injury. Absolutely remarkable. David Alaba, he gave a torrid time to. He's half fit after an injury layoff as well. But it felt like the sort of occasion and performance from Saka that whoever was playing as left back there, whether it was Roberto Carlos or Maldini, he would have given them an absolutely torrid time. And also huge credit to Martinelli on the other side as well. Against Fede Valverde, one of the fittest, most dynamic players in world football, playing out of position as a right back. But Gabriel Martinelli's last few games as well, showing signs that he's getting back to those 22, 23 levels as well.
Maybe just all coming together for Arsenal when it really matters in those forward positions. But for Real Madrid, I mean, 2 sides to every story, Pete. A real humbling, and it's such a rare occurrence for them in the Champions League. They've dominated this competition, as we know, for the last couple of decades. Yeah,
they just don't get beaten by this sort of scoreline in Champions League knockout games. And you could hear afterwards, Carlo Ancelotti very down in his press conference afterwards. Thought the first half was fairly even, but very disappointed with their second half performance. We can see here their biggest knockout defeats. Well, this has equalled it. So they lost 3-0 to Arsenal last night. And in the semi-final in 2013, they lost 4-1 to Borussia Dortmund.
Oh, yeah, that was the Classica final, wasn't it, at Wembley?
I did.
Yeah,
it went on to Bayern Munich, eventually
yeah.
beating Dortmund. This was Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, Dortmund, and used to say Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, aren't we? Lewandowski, all 4 goals. Real Madrid did win the second leg 2-0, so maybe a warning sign there for Arsenal that they will strike back Real Madrid, but it's a long way back for them now.
Yeah, we mentioned this before. In the Champions League knockout stage, there's only 4 times that there have been comebacks from 3-0 down. Barcelona have suffered 2 of them and enacted another of them. It's very, very rare, this. So Arsenal fans will be... Even the most nervous, I think, will be feeling OK about what happened last night. But Real Madrid, I mean, yes, we know, 15-time European champions, kings of the Champions League. I don't think we can really doubt that. I think what's the next nearest? Is it Milan with
on 7? Yeah.
Right, OK, so, it's case in point. But they bring in Kylian Mbappe, and you think, right, well, they're going to get even stronger. Not necessarily been the case. How do you assess his impact?
I think he's had a solid first year. I think he had a slow start, but 33 goals in all competitions. That's pretty impressive. It's just 4 short of the record set in the 90s for a player in their debut season for Real Madrid. He's scored more goals than Ronaldo did in his debut season, although Ronaldo's debut season was blighted somewhat by injury as well. But as you say, this is their 11th defeat in all competitions this season. They only lost 2 in the entirety of last year as they did a League and Champions League double. Toni Kroos's departure in the summer feels absolutely massive, and they have had injury issues at the back as well. No Eder Militao, no Carvajal. Alaba's had injury issues. They've had to play Tchouaméni and Asensio as their centre-backs for much of this season. But the Champions League campaign just hasn't really been good enough. They've lost to Milan, they've lost to Lille, sides you'd expect them to beat. They've also lost to Liverpool, Atletico Madrid, they lost the second leg to. If it wasn't for Julian Alvarez's double hit on that penalty, they might have never even reached this stage as well. So it does feel like Ancelotti's time at Real Madrid, as amazing as it's been, will probably come to an end this summer. I feel like it's quite difficult to survive a season like this at Real Madrid.
Yeah, unless they do
Unless there's a big turnaround.
the grandest of remontadas. I put some extra R's in there for you, just for you. I mean, comebacks. I mean, listen, it's possible, right? I know it's 3 goals, but, you know, what are the chances? You know, how do they have to approach this? We've seen before. We mentioned this just briefly before. I loved this one, by the way. This was one of my favourites.
Yes,
one of my favourites.
Deportivo had a decent team back then, didn't
they?
In the 2000s. Eventually down by Jose Mourinho's Porto.
That's right.
Well, later on in that
Yeah.
But yeah, more recently, of course, Liverpool, Trent with that cheeky corner.
Corner taken quickly, I believe is the 3-word mantra.
Yeah, getting a couple of goals in that one at Anfield when they incredibly turned that semi-final around in 20.
This was the Valverde era at Barca, wasn't it, when he suffered those 2 era-defining defeats?
Because just the season before, you're right, it all went wrong for them in Rome, didn't it, when they threw away that 4-1 first leg. And then this one adds extra storylines to tonight's game between PSG and Aston Villa, because, of course, it was Unai Emery against Luis Enrique here when PSG thought they were well through into the quarter-finals after beating Barcelona 4-0 in that last 16 time, and then got absolutely blown away at the Nou Camp 6-1. I
remember, I have to say, watching. Like, I was on my phone watching the scoreline to go, hang on, what? 4, 5, 6.
Couldn't believe
it. I mean, Neymar in chaos, wasn't it? That's sort of thing. Is that, you know, he seemed to thrive in that chaos at the Camp Nou.
So, look, evidence that it's not quite over yet, and Real Madrid at the Bernabeu can do special things, as Jude Bellingham mentioned, and as we just saw that quote from him. But Arsenal in a fantastic position now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And I think that we mentioned this before with Chris Boyd, the other element of this is that they've now got 5 places in the Champions League for next season then. So just tell us a little bit about this in terms of the coefficient. How have we got to this point? You know, we knew that this was likely, but now it's done, Pete. Is that right?
Well, not too much detail. I'll give you the big picture because it's quite complex. But essentially, you get points for your performances in the Champions League, Europa League, Conference League. So it's weighted across all of those European competitions and also on historic performances by your teams in Europe. And England lead the way. So the English League is set to have 5 places in the Champions League next season, and so will Spain if they can stay above Italy. Now, last year, England missed out to Italy and Germany. And the previous 5 years before that, England would have got those 2, that extra spot, that 5th spot, in 4 of those seasons. So Spurs were very unfortunate last year and badly timed to finish 5th. But Arsenal will have done a bit of a favour, I think, with that result for potentially the likes of Newcastle, Man City or Villa, maybe even Fulham, still dreaming of finishing in that top 5 position. But Newcastle in a very strong position, given they've got that game in hand on the teams around them, and they are playing fantastic football. I covered their game at the weekend after the Carabao Cup win. They just look full of confidence.
No hangover.
Exactly, no hangover. Completely focused on the goals they've still got ahead of them. But Man City lurking as well. So the opportunity there for 5 Champions League teams from the Premier League. Opportunity for more as well, of course. If Aston Villa, say, win the Champions League, they qualify for the competition next season as well.
And, of course, there could be more because we could get a Europa League winner that goes up into the Champions League. Could be 7. Let's dream. Fantastic. All right, guys, thank you very much for the moment.